All right, this is going to be our first risk video. We will talk about some of the different types of risk. You'll notice that this is chapter 8 in your book. So it's earlier. Your book does it along with population growth, but we kind of like to push it to the end. It pairs really well with the waste chapter because they're both kind of short. And because they both refer back to other stuff we've done. So some of this is going to be a review because we talked about it before, but we really like this chapter as this kind of review at the end as we're getting closer to the AP exam. If it is still happening this year, we will find out more from College Board soon, I'm sure, about AP exams and all of that, because this is a totally new thing. All right, so environmental health. Health is the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So when we're talking about environmental health, we're going to talk about like the health of the environment. A disease is an abnormal change in the body's condition that impairs physical or psychological function. So this is usually what we're going to talk about when we talk about like human health, or if we talk about the health of like animals or plants. Anything that impairs physical or psychological function. Diet and nutrition, so what you're eating, infectious agents, bacteria, viruses, toxic chemicals, things like mercury or arsenic, genetics, so that's what you're born with, trauma, and then psychological stress can all play roles in morbidity, the illness, and mortality, which is death. The focus in environmental health is on external factors that cause disease. So we're not really going to focus on the genetics as much as the other parts of this. And even that, we don't spend as much time on the effects of trauma and psychological stress just because those areas have not previously gotten as much research. We will kind of mention a couple things as we go through. All right, so global human health. Life expectancy is increasing as infant mortality decreases globally. Disability adjusted life years is this concept that we talk about where we combine the premature deaths and loss of healthy life resulting from either illness or disability. So when we talk about disability adjusted life years, we're talking about if a person lives to be 65, but during the last 10 years of their life, they had severe losses of like mobility, then their disability adjusted life year might be lower. And the reason for that is because a lot of times the disability that we're talking about is something caused by one of these diseases. And so this gives us an idea of whether there's a lot more parasites in one country than in another country, things like that. Because a lot of times this disability adjusted life year can reflect that. It can reflect that there's a significant decrease in countries that, for instance, have endemic malaria. Chronic conditions account for premature death and disease in both developed and developing countries, but we're going to see different patterns in the two. Heart disease, diabetes, depression, and stroke are becoming more common worldwide. Those used to be only in richer countries. We do still see higher rates of some of those in richer countries, but it's becoming worldwide. And then in developing countries, we tend to see more things like malaria and parasitic diseases. Tobacco-related lung diseases are also increasing worldwide. Now, in some countries, those are decreasing, but in others, it's increasing. So it really depends on where you're talking about with the tobacco-related lung diseases. And it is still yet to see how does vaping play into that problem. An infectious disease is any disease caused by a pathogen, so something caused by bacteria or virus. So COVID-19 would fit into that category. An acute disease is something that rapidly impairs the function of an organism, so that would be COVID-19 again. But a chronic disease is something that is slow. So it's slowly impairing the function of the organism over a long period of time. So more something like diabetes, something that is a more chronic condition that would have to be managed. But communicable diseases are responsible for about a third of all disease-related deaths worldwide. So diseases that result in death, about a third of them are from communicable diseases, and the other 2/3 are going to be diseases that are non-communicable. So diseases caused by poor diet or diseases caused by like genetics, things like that, or toxins. There are higher rates in countries with poor nutrition, poor sanitation, and low vaccination. And poor sanitation is going to be key here because it's easy to pass communicable diseases on if you don't have good access to like fresh water to wash your hands and soap and things like that. We've been hearing a lot about how important hand washing is recently. Pathogens are any organism that causes disease. They can be found in contaminated food and water, or they can be transmitted from person to person. So, like Ebola or HIV is transmitted person to person. So is COVID, or at least it seems like that's the most likely method of transmission. We're still learning a lot about COVID. Contaminated food and water could contain things like Giardia, as a pathogen, or it could contain different bacteria that can cause like diarrheal illness, things like that. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple of these historic infectious diseases, but I'm going to leave emergent infectious diseases for next time because this is just kind of an intro. And also, this will give us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about how these diseases become so widespread. And while COVID-19 is disrupting our lives right now, it is a very good example of some of this. So we're going to just stick with this historic stuff for today. So an epidemic is any situation in which a pathogen causes a rapid increase of disease. But epidemic is typically used for when we have a small area. A pandemic is when it's over a large geographic region. So that is why we have a pandemic now, because it is worldwide. Plague, this was an infectious disease caused by a bacterium, Yersinia pestis, that's carried by fleas. And if we look at our human growth chart, let's go ahead and Google that. Human population graph with plague. All right, so let's see. Yeah, this one's got it. Most of them will have it labeled. So you'll see, you've got that slow increase. And then we have a decrease here caused by the Black Death or the bubonic plague. So that is your Yersinia pestis. Other interesting factoid. If you want to buy Yersinia pestis, you can get it from giantmicrobes.com. It's actually kind of cute. So there's a lot of diseases you can get here as well. You might be able to get some of the other ones that we'll talk about as we go. I'm pretty sure you can get malaria. Let's see. Oh, look, they already have COVID-19. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you can get the mosquito and you can get Plasmodium falciparum. All right, so that brings us to malaria, an infectious disease caused by one of several species of protist in the genus Plasmodium. So they are these little tiny protists. And this is an interesting story with sickle cell anemia and the ability to fight off or not be as able to be infected with malaria. So people who have sickle cell trait have very, very low rates of malaria infection, which is one of the reasons, well, probably the reason, the main reason why sickle cell trait is common, much more common amongst people in areas where malaria is endemic. And then tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a highly contagious disease caused by the bacterium Mycobacterium tuberculosis that primarily infects the lungs. And tuberculosis is the disease that you see in movies and things. Whenever they cough into a handkerchief, if it's a period piece and there's blood, that's usually a reference to tuberculosis. At the time, it was actually considered a very beautiful disease because if you got it, you were very pale but with rosy cheeks. And so that was the look that people wanted to have. Tuberculosis actually caused some changes in fashion during the time. So just one of those interesting little tidbits. But that's our historic infectious disease. Like I said, I'm going to wait on the emergent infectious disease because we're going to talk for longer about that. And I just wanted this to be the intro. So that's it for this one.